happens, then they'll explain to you why that happens, because things fall to the earth, but then you can swing a ball around with a string attached to it. So therefore, somewhere there's a string involved in this whole process that we just don't see.
Yep.
The invisible gravity string.
Dude, that tethering centrifugal force stuff blows my mind. Like, that does not make sense at all to me.
So Zanick was talking about the invisible gravity tether string today. He came in specifically to talk about it.
You started with centrifugal. It's a centripetal.
Nope, that wasn't your cue. That wasn't your cue.
Oh, you made it.
We know all about it.
Corrected.
We know all
Guys,
about
things
your
aren't even
invisible
falling.
string.
Things aren't even falling. The ground's accelerating up. You guys are all mixed up.
Jeremy's right.
Right, but earlier today you said that things fall towards the ground.
It depends on the reference frame you're looking at. You can look at motion from any reference frame.
Of course. When in doubt, change the reference frame. We get it. We understand.
That's what reference frame. That's what reference frames are all about. They're all about where you look at the motion from. That's all they are.
From my reference frame, you're confused.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
What are you confused about?
No, I said from my reference frame, you're confused.
That's really has nothing with the point.
You were about to say true. You were about to say
I was not about to say true. I was about to just try to decipher the meaning of what your reference.
Well, let me ask you this: have you considered that using reference frames when it comes to physics is a compartmentalization, and ultimately can lead to, how about we'll call it compartmentalization fallacy?
Oh, sorry.
Because just because you can fractionate things into different modes doesn't mean that you can separate them into their own entire worlds, by which you then can make felonious claims about other ones that are claimed to be interconnected, but actually have no proof to even have existed in the first place.
That's a non sequitur as well, because the thing about reference frame is they all are mathematically represented. It's called transforms. Transforms is a part of mathematics and physics that is integral to your success in understanding, with respect to other things, what's really going on. So that's really a non sequitur thing. That's
but
not
from
true.
the non sequitur reference frame, you're wrong. Okay,
that's all gibberish too. No, you can. I can
there's
say.
always another
I
reference
can
frame by which
easily
you can
say. Hold on.
just invalidate something from. All you have to do is switch reference frames.
Well, no, it's not invalidated. I can easily say a ball falls to the ground. If I'm on the ground observer and I see something falling to me, it's very valid to say that ball is falling toward me. When we get into the why, hold on, let me finish. And then if you look at, you're on the ball itself, you're in the inertial reference frame, then the ground is accelerating up to you. Those two statements are both valid.
I do not agree. Not at all.
Mathematically,
those are totally different
all day long. Yeah,
completely different things.
Now, when you start saying the why, then you start saying, well, is it really falling and accelerating toward you? Well,
because you've removed the system you believe. It's not really you. It's not really you, but the system you believe essentially has got you thinking that compartmentalized system that is only interdependent on parts of itself, that you somehow think would need to be applied to reality, actually does not need to be. And the whole thing
that's not true at all, because you can see, like I said, if you let me finish, I would explain that from both reference frames, you can describe the motion mathematically, visually, even just verbally. But when you start looking at the why, then you start getting into problems of one versus the other, what is actually happening with respect to the other. For example, the ball falling. If you're looking at the inertial frame, that ball has no forces on it. So actually it's not falling or accelerating to the ground, because there would be forces on it for that to happen. We all believe in Newtonian mechanics. That's at a basic, touchy-feel level. But the ground is accelerating upward to the ball because there's no forces acting on the ball, yet we do see it accelerate to the ground.
There are
which one is accelerating has to be the ground.
Let's just do one quick point at a time. But they are accelerating. There are forces accelerating the ball.
No, nothing's accelerating the ball because the ball is inertial. There's no.
So I would say there's electrostatic and electromagnetic forces at all times, and there's an electromagnetic and electrostatic medium within the environment, the 100 volts per meter, that is measurable as well. So as it's moving within the medium, it's absolutely going to be affected by a whole array of many different forces of the electromagnetic and electrostatic spectrums.
That when you start saying electrostatics and apply forces, vectors to them, to the objects, it's cringe to me. It just really is so cringe, because you can easily test for that. Take some scenario, see something happen, then change the electrostatics, which we do understand fairly well in that environment.
I didn't say anything about this. I don't know if you're diverting, or because you're not really responding to. I didn't say anything about that.
You did. You said that it could be electrostatics and 100 volts per meter.
No, I said you said that when an object is falling, there's no forces acting on it. I then rebutted that and said I would say that what you have said is false, because there are electrostatic and electromagnetic forces always present on all matter, and there's an electromagnetic and an electrostatic medium with a spectrum that actually is measurable at different distances above the Earth. So when you drop something, it is absolutely being affected by many different forces. So I'm just rebutting the entire foundation and axiom of what you first said, which then you extrapolated a bunch of assumptions from for your whole point to be built.
Now, you could actually measure that voltage, and then you can see whether current flows and work is being done, or heat is being dissipated, or noise is being generated, and you don't see any of that. So even though this electrostatic and the medium, the gradient of voltage in the atmosphere can be measured, you don't see it doing any work on objects, because if you did see doing any work on objects, since we know the first law of thermodynamics is true, you would see some type of result of that, which we don't. And you could also test for whether those electrostatic differentials are actually creating any kind of work or movement by isolating it and then doing a simple scientific experiment, which you haven't done. Now, you can make that claim all day long, but you got to back it up with some type of experiment, which you haven't done. Now, what you could do is you could drop a box with a bunch of stuff in it and see inside that box how everything is inertial with respect to each other, and no preferential direction or speed or acceleration, all the same, regardless of its mass, densities, etc.
Well, one of the best direct examples of this is in nature as well. So there's these spiders that are the ballooning spiders, and these specific type of spiders, they seem to put their silk out, and their silk starts to float upwards, and then they start to fly, like they actually take flight. And originally, all the scientists studying it, they basically thought that perhaps it was just the wind that were picking them up, but they didn't really have an explanation for it. And they recently found out that the spider is actually emitting a charge into the silk, which allows it to essentially become anti-gravity, essentially, meaning instead of the thing like a spider that normally would be pulled down to the ground, once it puts this silk, it puts the silk and it goes up.
Yep.
So
I get it.
Like it can directionally change which direction it's charged.
Yep.
And so if the spider decides to charge it and put it up, then it'll start to take flight. And you can also take these spiders in a controlled experimental environment. You can put them into an actual small, like a box, basically, and you can add an electrical charge through it, a voltage, and you can raise it and lower it, and you will be able to, dependent, independent variable, you can actually adjust the intensity of it, and it will go up or down. So you can, and this is how they do tethering. They have these.
You're kind of going on
these tether. This is what tethering is essentially. With the
this is a long deal.
Military type. The military type structures that like NASA and others that use the tethering technology. It's a similar way. It's basically charging a thread in the environment to change its as it were, its gravitational direction, either down or anti-down, which would be up.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I mean, I got the point from day one, and I totally agree that if you apply forces to objects, even if you're using the electrostatics of the object and its surrounding, just no different than you can fly a plane. It's not anti-gravitational, it's not anti-gravity. It's just using forces against the forces that are already there, or the pseudo forces that are already there. Either way, but you cannot replicate that on a larger scale to say that that's why things like a lead ball falls, because there is some kind of electrostatic attraction to the ground. Because you could We know how electrostatics work. We know we can block it in many different ways. We don't see that. Then we also go to that box full of stuff. No matter what's in the stuff, what kind of stuff you have, how dense it is, what it looks like, water, liquids, gases, everything floats when you drop that box. And that shows that it is inertial, no fast forces are acting on it, yet the box accelerates downward with respect to the ground. However, the forces are not acting on the box. The ground is accelerating upward. And the only explanation that really makes sense in my mind is the bending warping of space-time. It may or may not be true, but that makes the most amount of sense versus electrostatics.
Okay. Well, hey, man. I guess that's what you're into.
That's my bag, baby.
Yeah, it happens to be based on a false cosmological foundation, but at the same time, it's a system that you've diligently learned, and you have tested probably some things in real life when it comes to other things, but then it seems like you are taking certain assumptions at liberty. Let's just say that, and then asserting them, and that's kind of where it becomes problematic because then people want to debate you on it. But that's what I would say.
Yep, I would guess that's what you would say, and I think you would know what I would say to that as well, so we don't need to say anything. We've come to an impasse. But as soon as you have some additional tests that can show,
everything you did a whole long monologue within all of that, and have kind of like diverted and then done a whole like I don't know what it's kind of a gish gallop at this point, I guess, but in terms of electrostatics, yeah, there absolutely is a measurable correlation between the ground. For example, you can actually test this charge in your own body if you're not grounded versus being grounded, like touching your body to the earth. You can actually directly measure the electrical charge differences. And there absolutely is this 100 volts per meter, which is what Feynman, who won a Nobel Prize, had measured this as well. So that already gives you a spectrum. And then everything has electrostatic and electromagnetic potential and charge, as it were, just use that term in general, just a generalized use of the term charge, has a field, as it were, that contains the electromagnetic and electrostatic spectrums. So like everything that we know of that has ever been tested or measured seems to contain that. So we also can adjust the movement of these things by adjusting the electrical charge, which means what we call gravity or something falling down to the earth, that is a movement. In that case, it's down to the earth. But if that can be reversed, then with this field, then that obviously does show that there is a direct correlation as to why an object falls and this electrostatic field. And the fact that there's a spectrum going up and the fact that everything has its own charge as well. And then I think there's density, there's additional components to the way matter is like, it's like a harmonious frequency of a vibration ultimately.
Yeah, so think about it this way, Gio. Everything within the periodic table of elements, as it's currently used, is oriented or described solely based on its atomic mass. So the differentiation between all of the elements that we have is its atomic mass, which is just a breakdown of how many protons, neutrons are present within the atom. So very simplistically, it's the amount of charge or charge potential within that specific matter makes up its atomic mass. So it would make sense that as we change this differential, right? So as we get to elements like helium, we see a movement upwards if we have some sort of gradient based on charge that we experience on Earth. Thus, we have basically a density gradient, the same way that we would have like a density tower with all things. That also exists within the air as well with gases. So all of this is set within a large density tower basically comprised of the charge and the voltage that you were speaking about. As you increase your distance from the surface of the earth, you're going to increase the amount of voltage that you're residing upon. So there is a flow, an energetic flow downward to the ground. So that energetic flow discharges to the ground. So there is a movement there. But I also wanted to add that I'm pretty sure if Zanick had a racehorse, he would probably call it Gish Gallop. That's just what I was thinking prior to you going on that last thing there.
Gish Gallop.
Yeah.
That would be for a name for a horse. Yeah, somebody could. It's probably been done. I imagine there's a horse out there that probably is called Gish Gallop. I would think. But
if Zanick had a racehorse, he'd probably flog it to death over and over and over and over and over again. Sorry.
But
yeah,
you know
I
what I'm
mean,
saying? Like the composition of elements, right? How do we define that?
yeah, you made a lot of excellent points, but as well, Napalm. That was awesome, dude. I agree with like virtually every single thing you said there. That was awesome. In terms of all of that, yeah, and the actual vibration of it, and well, I think like it seems like what Zanick is doing is like believing in this compartmentalized kind of a system that isolates certain factors and then tries to pit them against each other using some real physics and then some like built-in assumptions and pseudo physics built into it to then build the model from.
Yeah, and each little portion has its own compartmentalization, right? It's like when you want to talk about something else within the model, it's like, all right, let's put aside everything else that might interact with it, and let's look at it only from this perspective, i.e., specific reference frame. I mean, it's almost laughable that you could say, oh, but from this observer, they would be observing this, so therefore there's some type of force existing that changes what's actually physically taking place with these objects because somebody can view it from a reference frame that makes it look like it's doing something different. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, Napalm, what were some of those points you were saying before? Can we go over those one at a time if you want, dude? Because those were amazing. I was
Atomic
like,
mass?
yeah, let's go. Yeah, remember, yeah, with some of that, yeah. And where were we at
Well,
with
like,
that? Yeah, yeah, let's go from there.
yeah, well, all these, like, I I personally think that the atomic models they're put there in order for us to conceptualize something that isn't actually these little particles spinning around other particles, right? Most people nowadays even call them, what do they call them? Like a cloud, like an energetic cloud, as opposed to a specific little ball. But we all grew up with these conceptions of an atomic model where you have these little particles. You see the proton and the neutron and the electron, and they all have this um, geometry as they spin and orbit around one another. And the different amounts of protons contained within each element is what's going to comprise its atomic mass. So its overall count of protons, neutrons, and electrons, or whatever, how it's all displayed, is what gives that element its atomic mass. So ultimately, the description of that type of material boils down to its atomic structure. And all of those bonds, all of everything that takes place at that level is electrostatic in nature.
Yeah, so there is a core truth based on the actual frequency and structure of it.
Correct.
And then that's
Otherwise,
the model they've built from it based upon, yeah, because exactly. Of course, there is certain accuracy to that whole system. Because, yeah, I took all those courses in college and chemistry, at the college level and all that. So, yeah, it is, there is a way in which there is certain validity to that system, like certain chemical compositions. Yeah, and we had to do all the calculations and everything. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's an incorrect model per se. I just think the way that it's described to us so that we can work with it probably isn't necessarily the reality of it, but it is working. So I don't disagree with it in that sense. But when you think about it, all the movements at that atomic level are defined based on an electrostatic force, not a gravitational force. So why would we stand to figure that as things become or come up to a different scale, that somehow the inherent forces that we seem to define, gravity as something that's inherent to mass, right? It's a force that's inherent to a mass. That's why mass attracts mass, because it's an inherent force. Yeah, it's inherent because the forces that hold all of that matter or that mass together are electrostatic in nature. And then when you get up to a different level, it's still dealing with a similar type of electrostatic force, just on a different scale. And now we're dealing with the atmosphere and the earth and everything that's residing upon it in this scale. And we do see some sort of movement that would, or I guess you could say some sort of scalar gradient that would easily define why things reside where they are and why they, for lack of a better term, seek to go towards their specific place of rest or trying to seek their inertia. It makes sense.
Beautifully said. Absolutely, man. Yes. That was on fire.
I mean, I also look at
Yeah, no one's going to say space-time is holding your car together. They will say it's electrostatics, though.
Yep. I mean, that's the whole, citable quote that Austin uses all the time, where it's like all molecular and intermolecular bonds are inherently electrostatic. So why would we think that what holds matter together or what comprises mass would somehow have no effect on that mass at another scale?
And also when we know that the gradient is able to be measured as well, that there is this electrostatic gradient, then that would absolutely mean that within this Earth realm that we live in, that there would be a direct connection to the medium, why things go up, why things go down, how all matter equalizes within the plane.
Yeah, I mean, everything seeks to establish this like density tower, even when we're talking about the gases, right? But why does helium want to move upwards? It's the buoyant force. Well, that buoyant force has something to do with what they call gravity, but what they call gravity is just a measurement of how things, like the speed limit, or I guess you could say not even the speed limit, but the agreed upon average in which things tend to, like masses tend to accelerate towards the Earth itself. But it's not actually an acceleration towards the Earth. It's dealing with it's riding the energetic stream that is always constantly working its way from the sky to the ground.
This acceleration thing is over.
Is it one question? Is it connected with the skylights? Do you think?
I think
Energy?
that there is. Yeah, I honestly think that what we see in the sky is very similar to what we see on the microscopic and lower the atomic level. I think it's a very similar type thing, and those lights are just points of energy, and that energy is also residing within the same energetic structure, which seems to have a movement to it as well. So not
Nice.
only do we have the downward, but we also have this kind of swirling
Yeah.
movement within, the energetic structure in which we reside.
We're on fire tonight, Napalm. Forgive the pun. Does that mean that there are boundaries then above? Of course, the polar view or the extended view, anyway, is that we have a sort of an infinity before us. So, does that say anything about boundary conditions or what lies beyond?
I think the boundary conditions are set more in the way of what we experience as matter. At some point, you get far enough away from the surface of the earth to where you're dealing strictly with energies and things break down at that kind of level, meaning matter begins to break down, not necessarily that it's a like a hard fast barrier that we're residing within,
Mm.
but it transitions into an energetic transitionary period,
Yeah.
and then I think at that point it becomes what we could consider maybe counter space, where matter ceases to be manifest into the three-dimensional structure, and it basically collapses in upon itself and back
Mm.
into the pure state of inertia, which would be pure rest, which would be on the counterspatial side. And I don't know if I could perfectly describe the counterspatial aspect, but I think it's the same as this, just in the opposite direction. But we have no idea how to conceptualize that because we reside on this side.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that, bud.
Yeah, and then I was thinking before, Napalm, with what you were saying, and then how do you think density plays into that, and how does that connect to the electrical fields and electrical charges of things? Because, of course, we could be said that as you go down, it gets more dense in terms of the oceans, perhaps, and the pressures and everything. And then going up, there's the idea that that's a less dense, obviously, and helium rising and these objects that have very little density, and it gets into buoyancy and density as well. But um, how how do you think charge correlates with buoyancy and density? I guess that's the ultimate question I wanted to ask.
Yeah, well, if you look at the periodic table of elements and everything being structured by its atomic mass would be kind of you can look at that whole entire table as like a density structure, right? So the compactness of matter and the mass in which comprises it is going to set its density, and all of that is made up of, as we know, these different charges and charge potential. So if you're dealing with an element that has a higher atomic mass, it's going to be more dense, and thus it's going to have a tendency downward, and vice versa as you get towards the gases.
I think polarity plays a big role too. So the medium, whatever polarity the medium is, and the polarity of the object, that will play a role, probably more so than the density or buoyancy. But when you consider that even to determine whether or not it has an electric field, or like when electricity comes into play, or when that happens, is due to vibration, has to vibrate at a certain rate, and within a certain range you'll have that. Within other ranges you'll have other things, like you have light, you'll have plasma. It depends on what range
Yep.
those vibrations are. So that's how the medium would play a role in that. Like if it hindered, and if the polarity was different, it would change those vibratory natures, which would in turn change the electric nature. And all of those things would determine how it behaves in that medium.
What's up,
I
Flats?
think this. You think this connects with our
I'm not
auras, our own
Flatsy.
individual
Sorry.
auras, Napalm? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was my fault. I spoke over you. I just let someone know that I wasn't Flatsy. That's cool. I guess we sound a little alike. Go ahead, Pete.
Okay, all I was going to say is, do you think this, well, both of you, do you think this is intimately connected with our own auras, maybe suppressed energies, as everything is within, is there aspects of all elements to be found within us to a greater or lesser degree? Is this indeed the nature of our composition? Yeah, do you think this has got to do with, say, our clothing or our footwear? Did you see that recently about if you have rubber soles on, the energy in the air? And when a voltmeter was connected to the ground and connected to the hand with the rubber soles, a very, very high reading. And when you take off the rubber soles and just stand on the earth, then a very, very low reading. Same thing with around energy sort of supply lines or whatever. Very, very high reading when you're in rubber soles, insulated from the ground, or there's no passageway for everything to discharge through you. But yeah, do you think this is an unhealthy thing for us, and our auras have been suppressed via, I guess, modern misinformation? That's just a general question.
I would say what people consider your auras would be kind of, yes, electrical in nature. I think everything is kind of electrical in nature, right? So you have this kind of energetic sphere of influence, kind of however you want to describe it, that's around you. And I think that can be certainly influenced and manipulated and or affected by different types of vibrations that we experience. I think the more we continue to pump out different um, varieties of EM waves, I think that has an effect on our psychology as well, because it is affecting us energetically. I just don't think we have enough study or talk about how that could possibly affect us. Um, at least not an open discussion, an honest open discussion about whether or not these things are affecting us energetically. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, why I mentioned our current situation, what they tell us about our environment, is because I think ultimately, yes, we have our own sort of internal consistent or constituency, so we have this ability, we're actually vibrating, we're vibrating because we're made up of all of these different materials which are reacting to the greater prevailing life force, if you want to call it that. But yes, because we have been suppressed, our minds are, of course, have been suppressed, but led away from the greater truth. We have to now increase our energy knowingly and helping ourselves in terms of the clothing and the different conductivity of this. This is what I'm going to say now, which might seem a bit strange. This invading energy. This is an unnatural setting that we're in. What we take to be natural and the beauty of creation is actually, for me anyway, it's not the ugliness, but almost of destruction in comparison to the power, beauty, and ourselves in our own lives, and live it out in terms of the division as we have this experience here. So yes, becoming aware of the greater energies. I'll just point out about churches. I pointed in chat, but churches have copper line because copper reacts a specific way to the prevailing energies. But beneath then you have the calm and quiet church environment where the organ, sweet organ music can help lull people and make them more maybe susceptible or spiritual. It just depends on how you look at it. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, awareness of this sort of broken condition externally and internally will help us ourselves increase our own internal spirit. It's like, I was just thinking earlier, it's like the lightsaber in a sense, but in a sphere around you. Yeah, I'm done now. I'm done.
I'm not even sure where we were before that. There were so many things you just did there. That was like a bunch of different points, man. What was the last point that was actually being made? Or what was the point you were making, Pete? Like if you had to sum it up in one point?
Well, I'll just run off what he said there real quick. I think he may or may not have been alluding to different changes within the environment based on like EM waves, right? So we're constantly getting bombarded with all different kinds of EM waves, and you're talking Wi-Fi, you're talking cellular networks, radio signal, all this kind of stuff that seems to probably put at some point us in a less natural state, being bombarded with all that stuff. And when he was saying that, I was even thinking about the possibility that even when it seems as though, at least biblically, there was a point in time in which there was a little bit more symbiosis between even animals and things like that, with them not being aggressive and killing each other and all that kind of stuff. I sometimes wonder that could the creator change some sort of vibration to change certain things, like allowing for the fundamental nature of an organism to slightly change and change maybe the way they act and the behavior. I don't know. And could we do that artificially?
About our own place in the world, about the rice experiment. So your own intention can affect sort of growth or decay rates. But yeah, ultimately it's about us finding out, I think, our positioning within this prevailing atmosphere. And I think actually the nighttime is the calm time. We actually sleep our way through it, where I believe it's said that most of the business gets done at nighttime. People are energetic, more so than oppressed than at daytime.
I think the answer to both of your questions, Napalm, would be yes, but I would like to believe that the way that would work would be that if we change it, or if people change it, we as humans, if we change it to cause harm, that the creator could just, change it to cause good. Like maybe alter the things that are within it, receiving the harmful effects, alter them in a way to where that harmful thing could in turn become good at some point, or just, fix, maybe repair what they're doing. I don't know, maybe it requires us being aware of what those things are, knowledgeable, and taking action. I don't know. I think the answer is yes to both.
Great point. Those are great points. I was just going to throw in there fermentation. That's one way that I think can eliminate certain toxic substances through the really good, positive, beneficial bacteria.
I feel so good when I go camping and I'm like sleeping out underneath the stars. I don't know. When I wake up, I just feel all
Yeah, well, there's also like ions in nature. That's, as they call them, ions, which you like absorb and breathe, and they're all coming off of all the natural vegetation and the water and the cleaner air, and having all the trees and the ecosystem be actually, in its natural state, or at least as close as possible. No, but I was just thinking, like, in that transmutation process, I was just thinking, that's why I brought up the fermentation, because if you have some kind of like a very powerful food that has a lot of very good bacteria in it, and then you ferment it and make an even more potent, like even just taking like raw milk and then just add some raw honey to it, and then just like kind of spin it in like a vortex, and then just put it in the fridge. Then maybe like open the top here and there, or if you get a top that just lets a little bit of air in, that works really good too. And then it'll just make like a fermented super honey, where the honey seems to help like the good bacteria to thrive and vice versa. Then there's even the question, like, could that even like eliminate toxins in that actual, if there was toxins in it from something that got in there, like would that fermentation be able to do that even to that level? Would it be able to like extinguish toxic chemicals, for example?
I wonder if anyone's ever done any like Krillian, the Krillian photography where. Go ahead.
Curling photography.
Yeah, are you talking about where like somebody loses a finger and you can take a picture of that hand and energetically the finger's still there, or a branch, pull a leaf off of it, take a picture, and energetically the leaf is still there. That's Krillian photography.
Yeah, and you can also see like the auras come. You can see auras like coming. If I'm not mistaken, that's the kind of photography that they use. Is it not? If it's not, then maybe someone correct me. I'll know,
Yeah,
the right
Curlian.
direction to look.
Yeah, Curlian photography. Yeah.
Yeah, where
Yeah,
where they
that's
see
it.
the auras like at the tips of your fingers. I'd be curious to know if they've done that on what you're speaking about, like the fermented foods and milk and honey and so forth, like how that changes.
Well, the Curlian photography, yeah, it shows like the actual energetic field that surrounds the object. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, it actually shows like a field. So you can like look at like a leaf or a thing in nature and actually see like a glow, like an actual glowing field around it, like an aura, like you were saying, like an energetic toroidal kind of field, some kind of a
Yeah, you
individuated
could.
individuated realm. That's what we live in an individuated realm. We're all individually observing it, but it all seems to be pretty. It's all overlapping for us, it seems.